Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ask Amy podcast. And this is all over the news, so we wanted to talk about student loan forgiveness. We're getting a whole lot of questions from people who hear, oh, I can get my student loans paid off. And a lot of this information and the details are still being worked out. So I've invited Andrea Robayo. She's with the College Money Guys to come in and kind of make sense of some of this now, at least what we know to this point.
So far, yes.
Yeah, so thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you.
We want to talk a little bit more about what the College Money Guys, like what they do, and we're getting there. What they don't do are get people signed up for student loans. That's what you try to avoid.
That's what we avoid, yes.
But student loans and student loan forgiveness is our topic today. And you would be surprised, perhaps if you're listening to this, you're not surprised, that some people don't even know if the student loan that they've been paying on is a federally backed or is a federal student loan. I mean, they know that they owe this amount. They know that they make the payments, but they don't really know. They know they filled out the FAFSA, and so then they just assume that it's a federal student loan. But not everybody is eligible for the student loan forgiveness. Only people who have federal student loans. Correct. What can you tell us about, and how do I find out if mine is eligible?
Of course. So the best thing is to go to studentaid.gov. It's a federal website, and there you'll see all the providers and servers that have work with the government to provide loans at that point. But any private loans, so any bank loans, will not be forgiven. Any loans from your uncle or anything like that will not be forgiven, or state loans will not be forgiven.
Okay, and so you might remember that studentaid.gov website if you had a federal student loan, or in the beginning, maybe when you were still in school or you first took it out, maybe you went there.
Yeah.
So when you go now, you may need to sign up, maybe change your password to reset your account. But when you go in, you should be able to go into that studentaid.gov. Once you get in with your username and your password, click on View Details, and then look for a loan breakdown. And there's an aid summary page that has a list of your federal student loans.
Yes, it's about a dozen of them. And there's a list. It also gives you, like, if you've qualified for a Pell Grant in the past, it also give you a structure of what your loans looked like.
Okay, so Andrea, tell us why that's important. Whether you had just federal student loans or a Pell Grant and federal student loans, it makes a big difference right now with this loan forgiveness.
Yeah, it's a $10,000 difference. So if you just simply pulled out loans, they're forgiving $10,000 of that amount. But if you also had Pell Grants and you use them to pay for college, then they will cover $20,000 of your whole loan, which is great. And so you need to know, and that's important to know. Obviously, nobody wants to miss out on $10,000.
Yeah,
that's available to them.
Exactly. And so I didn't really know the difference in all of those, but I was reading that Pell Grants were created as a way to promote access to education. So they were reserved for undergraduates with more significant financial need. But
Correct.
Usually, so grant, just in the word grant, you don't have to pay that back. But the grant didn't cover the whole cost of your education. And so you take out that grant
and loan.
And so that's why you get the $20,000 to pay back the loans if you had a Pell Grant, because if you had a Pell Grant, it assumes that you were in greater financial need.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was an attempt, or continues to be an attempt to help people under like $60,000 a year that they're making, to hopefully help them, but it nowhere near covers any sort of expenses that most people have to also take a loan out at the same time with the Pell Grant.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So now we've gone over, you can get $10,000 reduced of your federal student loans, $20,000 if you had a Pell Grant. There are some income restrictions, but you think they're pretty generous.
I think it's incredibly generous. For an individual, you have to be making $125,000, and if you're a married couple, it's $250,000. That's a pretty generous amount. For most Americans fall underneath those brackets. Yeah. So I think it's quite well done.
And so then people want to know, well, then, okay, how and when do I get this? Like, do I have to sign up? Are they just going to automatically reduce that amount off of my loans? So how will we go about
if you filled out a FAFSA, every October 1st, the FAFSA website launches. And that's when we complete all of the financial aid forms. It's going to work the same way. October 1st, they're going to launch they're calling it just an application, essentially matching your social security number, name, and a tax bracket to ensure you qualify. And they're estimating between 4 to 6 weeks to completely eliminate the loan from your balance.
That's pretty fast for the federal government.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
I was like, wow, they need to do this all the time.
I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but it's, a great idea.
It's a great idea. I will say that we must forgive and give them some leeway, as it's, these companies are run by people and there'll be mistakes made, but they're hoping for 5 to 6 weeks because obviously repayments will start January of 23.
Yeah, because a lot of the servicing companies, those are private companies, and they may be private companies servicing your federally government-backed loan.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about that. I did read that in some instances, the federal government, Federal Student Aid Office, already knows how much you made. And if that were the case, they may not even wait for you to fill out that application, or they may not need you to.
Correct.
I would just go ahead and do it anyway. When it rolls out, it's supposed to be available sometime like around October 1st.
Yeah, October. I would fill it out. Don't put your faith on something like that. I would just complete it. And hopefully, I'm sure they'll forgive the $10,000 or $20,000 if you had qualified for Pell grants as well.
Yeah. So what we talked about is, I said, where this hurts are the people that so people haven't had to pay on their student loans since March of
April
2020?
Of 2020, yeah.
2020. I mean, that's a long time to not have to pay.
Yeah.
And so when we've done consumer stories and sort of paying down debt stories, we've said take advantage of this time with no interest. Sure, you don't have to make your payments, but if you do, you're paying interest free. And so some people probably did that and they made their payments, and then it's like, wow, so all those people just lost that money?
No. So they thought about it. And I thought this was, again, a great thing for them to do. If you have made the payments over the last 2 years when you were technically not supposed to or not required to, you're able to get that money back and refunded back to you.
Okay.
Which I thought was, I think that's great and fair. Yeah.
Do you know how that works? Like, how are they determining that? Also fill out the application?
You fill out the application because most likely, hopefully you still qualify for the $10,000 forgiveness, but you call the provider, your server, your loan provider, and they'll send you a check to refund you.
Got it. And then you were saying a lot of these things, guys, I mean, Andrea is in a perfect position to know about a lot of this, but I mean, the federal government's still working out the details on some of these, which is why those applications aren't out, which is why they're still coming up with the details. But can you kind of explain what you're saying that you think? So say you paid $5,000 off over the last 2 years, but you owed 10 or you owed 15.
Right.
What might that look like, we think?
What we think and what they're saying is that the provider will send you a check to refund you. So you will get your money back
from what you paid.
From what you've paid. On top, you complete the application in October, and they'll forgive since we're doing 5, they'll forgive an additional 10 or 5,000 or an additional 15, depending if you qualified for the Pell Grant or not. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So those people wouldn't be penalized for going ahead and knocking down that debt and paying it off when they didn't have to.
No, they're actually I think they're great. They're being rewarded. Like everybody else, which is great.
So I got a Facebook message this morning, and I was confused by that because I hadn't heard of this part of it that you're explaining to me that, you won't be penalized. And so this was a viewer, Lupita, and she said, I just called my servicer, and they explained, sure, that they could give me that refund, but once they do, they're going to make my student loan active again, and then I'm going to have to pay that back after they refund it. And you're like, that doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right. I don't know the situation, but usually when a loan, most of us have paid some level of loans in the past, that loan's paid out completely. It won't be refunded to you once you've paid it off completely.
Yeah.
That is the only downside to it. I suppose that people who have completely paid off their loans, they don't get a refund of $10,000 or $20,000. That's just,
You're just debt free, and congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is, I thought about, okay, so for people in Lupita's situation who they're getting these answers that don't sound right from their loan servicer, there is this ombudsman with federal student aid. So that is one sort of resource that they could use. And I'll put that link, but it's basically at studentaid.gov or Google student aid ombudsman disputes, and you can go there and you can tell them online, or there's a 1-800 number, and explain to them what your servicer has told you. And again, because that ombudsman may be waiting for guidelines on this whole loan forgiveness, but they would be a good resource to sort of help you walk it through before you just take the word that your servicer gave you.
I would also say that reach out. Most of us have access to the Department of Education. Just go on their website. They have a specific number for FAFSA providers and like FAFSA questions. That is a much better alternative to go, in my opinion, because you do get someone from the Department of Education answering your questions specifically, who are trained solely on the FAFSA, on the loans. If you forgot your password, for example, it's been years since you've logged on or something like that, you can call them and ask them to activate your account, resend you a link. So, you know, they're great. There's a great resource.
Have you found that they answer the phone? Have you called recently? I mean, like the IRS. I never tell people, oh, just call the IRS. People would like throw pies at me.
They've picked up the phone. The only time they don't is during an administration turnover. Okay. So from one administration's changing.
Like a lame duck period. They're like,
there's
what's
like
the point?
There's like a month lapse where it just nobody picks up. Like I experienced it during the last election. So that month, we called and no one picked up. And we experienced it with the last election as well. Okay. So there's like that lapse period between a new administration coming in and the next one, and they change the rules, laws, and everything. So they're not the most reliable during those times.
Okay, well, we're not there right now, so hopefully that is a good resource. You could call the Department of Education to try to get some of those answers. I also wanted to talk about, so there are, the loans and then the Pell Grant, the forgiveness for both of those, the amounts that you'll get, but then also public service loan forgiveness. I was reading a little bit about this that's included in the loan forgiveness program. And you said traditionally, and I have heard consumers complain, they say if you have like a federal or a government job, or you're in the military, that you can get some of this loan, some of this loan forgiveness, but people are like, but I've tried and it's not easy.
And that's our experience as well. It's incredibly difficult to qualify for them. They make you jump hoops and loops and do hula hoops through to try to get it, and you still might not get it or be eligible for it.
So if that is you, if you've tried and you do work in any of those sectors, it's by certain nonprofits. If you have a student loan and you work for a nonprofit, a military, federal, state, tribal, or local government, you could be eligible for this public service loan forgiveness. And if you've tried before and been discouraged, they say that there are some temporary changes that make it easier to qualify with this student loan forgiveness. But those changes expire October 31st, 2022, and you have to apply for those. So for more information on those, you would go to PSLF, like Public Service Loan Forgiveness.gov. And there's a place where you can apply. Now, if you wait until November 1st or later, these sort of requirements that have been eased will no longer exist. So you have to take advantage of it soon. I would go in quickly and do that. And the reason that they were telling people when this application comes out for everybody else on October 1st to fill it out as quickly as possible is because they say the whole idea is that if you fill out the application and they can get your loan reduced or completely wiped out within 4 to 6 weeks, then you'll never have to worry when the deferments end, when payments are due again come January 2023. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to just not have to worry about that and say like, oh, but wait, I qualified. And they're like, oh, you've got one more payment or this interest accrued.
Right. So from what I've read from the White House, they're really pushing people, if they're eligible for this, if you're within that tax bracket, to go in this year as quickly as possible and do the application, get the money forgiven that you're eligible for. Because as soon as repayment starts, I don't want to, their wording was, that's too late at that point. Once we start coming back and asking people to repay, we are not sure if we can give you that money back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So don't put your head in the sand.
No. Go in. Yeah.
And call all your neighbors, your friends, your kids, and say like, hey, you got to do this October 1st.
I read that directly from the White House website. So I would just encourage everybody go spread the news and apply.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. We mentioned that the college money guys and Andrea Robayo don't really recommend student loans, but they're in the business of helping students and students going to college get money. They help you find money for college. So when we come back, they're going to tell us how they managed to do that without student loans, and also a little bit about sort of this crisis. I don't know if we'd go that far as to call it a crisis, trying to pay for college.
It's a crisis for families.
Yeah. I mean, when you think I want an education, and why do I have to take out basically essentially a mortgage to get it? Yeah. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about those things. Welcome back to the Ask Amy podcast. We are here with Andrea Robayo. She is with the College Money Guys. And while we spent most of the first part of this podcast talking about student loan forgiveness, now we're talking about college, how much it costs to go to college. And then we want to get into a little bit of what the College Money Guys, what you guys do for people. College is expensive.
Wildly expensive. It's skyrocketed since probably the 80s. I would say I've met people, and maybe some of you experienced this, where you worked 2 jobs and could pay for college.
Yes, that was me. Yeah. I mean, Starbucks, wrote for the college paper, and came out of college with no debt.
Yeah, and that's how it's supposed to work. But nowadays we have kids who could work 3 jobs and still not afford college. That's how expensive it is nowadays.
I mean, and so what we were talking about is, the whole loan forgiveness came out of the pandemic, and families are hurting. And then there's this, inflation, and the cost of everything is going up. So let's kind of help families who are hurting and suffering. But this inflation and the rising cost of college has been around for much longer than that. I mean, that sort of seems to be the need for this.
That's the problem. I see this as trying to mitigate hurt. People are hurting, with inflation, with the pandemic. We've gone through a lot in the last 2 years. And so this is a way to help, fix problems. But realistically, the cost of college is the problem. $70,000 a year to go to a university, I'm not quite sure how to sell that to someone and make it reasonable. Make it like, that's a great idea. Let's spend this much money on education every year. Not even $70,000 for 4 years. Okay, that's an every year tuition for some universities.
Right. I mean, and you said that you guys are kind of seeing, and you were looking at some numbers that show over the last couple of years, you've seen males kind of pulling out of college and saying it's not for me.
It's not, the reward's not there, right? So most of what we've seen through the College Money Guys is our males are pulling out of college. It's not logical for them. That's usually the response I get from them. They obviously want an education, want a better future for themselves, but are calculating the cost of college with what they potentially will make out once they're working in the workforce. And they just don't see that reward ratio that they're hoping for. So we're seeing trade schools, we're seeing a lot of just going straight into the workforce and doing it maybe the really old-fashioned way of working through the ranks instead of education per se.
Right. And I guess, because there probably are a lot of students who get out of college with that 4-year degree, and I mean, no matter what you major in, but you sort of have to say, make it make sense. I mean, okay, so you picked something you were interested in school, and then you had to take out these massive student loans to get there, not considering or thinking, when I get out, are there any jobs that pay even a quarter of what I owe?
So I went to the University at Albany in New York, and I had a great mate, and New York State requires teachers to have a master's to be able to teach in public school and privates. And so she was going through that process. And, Albany's expensive. I think at the time it was about $35 a year. But she would be coming out, she'd be forced to get a master's degree upon the requirement of state of New York. And she would be making $45 a year.
Wow.
But she just got a master's that usually takes about 5 to 6 years. And each year she paid $35 for her. The ratio just doesn't make sense. Just make it make sense. That's all.
Make it make sense is what I say to people all the time when I'm trying to figure out stories. Make it make sense. Like how, And so the founder, the owner of the College Money Guys, Brandon Lloyd, you said is really big on this, on
accountability of the colleges. Like we exist because there's a problem. We wouldn't be here. He wouldn't have launched this company if college was how it used to be, that you could work 2 jobs and still afford it. So the reason he came with the college or made up the College Money Guys is because the need of families who can't afford it, and tried to say, look, colleges, to the universities themselves. Most of us don't know they're nonprofits, actually. All of them are run through nonprofits.
Like state schools and
private schools are all nonprofits. So they don't even pay taxes normally.
Wow.
But they're still charging what we know them to charge. And so he's saying this is a great solution for a problem that we're having to help people as much as possible. But the problem is these colleges through the pandemic still went up in price. So we're having an inflation that says, I don't know what it is today, but let's just say 9%.
Yeah.
They're usually 3 times past that when it comes to raising their prices. In 2020 to 2021, they raised their prices. We're expected to continue that trend, and they're not stopping. And so people are saying, like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
you know,
right.
What are you doing? Yeah.
If I do want to go to school and I want to be a teacher, at what point do people, I mean, we need teachers.
Yeah.
And at what point are just like, well, I can't be a teacher because once I become a teacher, I'm never going to be able to pay for the school I was required to get.
Yeah, and there's millions of people, I'm sure some of them who are listening, who've gone to school but couldn't graduate. So they still have loans that they took out to pay for college, but don't have a degree to show for it because they couldn't make it the full 4 years because of affordability problems.
Yeah. I mean, so what is, I know that I saw the University of Texas, for example, we reported last year that they came up with a free tuition or a very, very low tuition for low-income families, but that was very low income. It's not the norm. It's not the middle-income American.
No, and so we work with middle America, we like to say. It's families who can't afford, let's just say we're at like $40,000 a year for tuition. That's still a huge bill every year for a family. If that's just one kid. If you have multiple children, then that's, a different story. But we work with families who can't just pay $40,000 a year for their tuition, but don't receive any help. They don't qualify for the Pell grants. They don't qualify for federal or state help. So that's the middle America we work with.
And how do you work with them? So you're telling them, okay, so they don't qualify for those federal loans or the Pell grant, and you're telling them don't take out like the other private loans. What do they do? How are they supposed to send their kids to college?
So it's in our name, the College Money Guys. Our focus is the universities themselves. So what we do in our program is on paper to ensure that you look the most financially opt for like a scholarship. Our goal is scholarships and any sort of grant, anything that you don't have to pay back is our goal. So our focus is we work with your student to find the greatest fit, because these colleges have millions upon millions of dollars in endowments, and they do use them. And our goal is to ensure your child is right in line with that endowment and scholarships.
To be able to get that. I remember because we did a story with the College Money Guys right before the pandemic, and I remember Brandon saying, don't let your child get attached to and say, oh, I have to attend this school. I mean, so many people that I went to school with said, I am either going to the University of Texas or Texas A&M. Yeah. Right? I mean, and it's like, great. That's what everybody says when you graduate from a Texas high school. But why? Why do you have to sort of be willing to go to a university that might be a great school, but it was never on my radar?
So for example, UT, huge school. It's a great school. There's no question about it. Sorry to anybody, I'm not the biggest fan of the university solely because they have such a large endowment that they can provide a full ride to every single undergraduate in their school and still have millions of dollars left in their endowment. Wow. But they don't. For a valedictorian, that means you graduated like first in your class, you get $10,000 for 1 year.
Wow.
And that's it.
It doesn't cover a whole lot.
No, especially in Austin, right? Where just living is more expensive. But so UT, is in Austin, but another great university is Concordia University. It's also in Austin, and they have to compete with the mammoth that is UT. And so they try to give scholarships as an incentive for people to forget the Longhorns and come to them.
And you'll still be close by,
And
right?
you can still get the games. They'll still allow you in if you want to. So that's why you don't want to get your child attached to a school, is because you need the availability to shop around, to look. And when we buy cars, we're not kind of set on one. We're looking across and what is the best deal that we got.
And so you guys are helping them when they come in figure out, okay, what school might be a good fit and what school maybe that you haven't considered that might really want your child there and be willing to pay for them to go there.
Yeah, there's some great schools like Concordia that on paper, when you see them, because it's a private school, they'll charge $50,000 a year, right? So that's a lot. But they're trying desperately to get kids to come there, and they provide scholarships. So that cost I've seen it drop down to $15,000 a year out of pocket.
Oh, wow.
Which is cheaper than UT. Cheaper than a lot of other schools, state schools.
Where originally the parent would have thought, oh, that's a private university. We're not even looking at that.
We're not even doing it. We hear that a lot, but we find that private schools, for a plethora of reasons, it's cheaper. You're in and out in 4 years. The goal is to get a job, hopefully, afterwards, right? So we want you in and out in 4. The average right now is 6 years to graduate from a state school in Texas.
Wow, really?
6 years, yeah. And that's not with a master's or 2, no, that's just an undergraduate's degree.
Do you know why? I mean, is it students that are just slacking? They're taking a longer time. I mean, that's what I used to think, why it would take 6 years if you weren't earning a higher degree.
With that being said, though, with private schools, they still are at 4-year average. They still get the kids in and out in 4 years.
Okay.
And I don't want to say one school cares more than the other, but one school, private schools, have a higher need for them to look good on paper. So they do focus on the graduation rate. They do focus on individually catering to your child to ensure that they succeed through college. Where a state school, it's just a number on the paper. I went to a state school. I feel like I can say that. I was just a number on a paper. And I met with a counselor once every year to pick courses, and that was it.
Yeah.
Where a private school has a bit more tailored aspect to it,
Okay, so people can find you guys. If they are interested, you might be interested, parents, if you're listening to this and you've got young students, that they actually would like to start seeing your family and your student to sort of get you ready and lined up for how to get these scholarships. At what age? What age would you say the family would come in?
A freshman in high school would be a great start. Because not only from a financial standpoint that we can start planning with the family, but from a student standpoint, we can erase the Longhorns and the Texas A&M.
You're hypnotizing them, right?
Like let's look how the other schools that are here in Texas. You don't have to go out, but here in Texas. So freshmen, sophomores is the best time to come and see us.
Okay. All right. And so thecollegemoneyguys.com.
Yes, thecollegemoneyguys.com. You can call us at 713-422-2720. And we're here to help you out.
All right. And whether you use Andrea and the College Money Guys to sort of help prepare your child for college, to try to find money for college, whether you do or not, I appreciate you coming in to explain all of the information on the student loan forgiveness program. Watch for that application coming out October 1st, because that is what you're going to want. And then leading up to that, you can go to studentaid.gov and sign in to find out if you have a federal student loan that is going to be eligible for this forgiveness, for this money coming back.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a great thing for people. I know not everybody's happy, but it's a start. I believe it's a start in the right direction.
All right. Thanks so much for coming in today. You guys have a great day.